You are 23 years old, and you are late for your shift at a concrete plant in Yekaterinburg when the foreman tells you not to bother coming back. You stand in the parking lot for a long time, holding your lunch in a plastic bag, calculating how many weeks of rent you have left. 11 days. Your answer is 11 days. On the way home, you pass a bar called Zvezda, and inside, at the back table, is your cousin Dmitri, who has been buying rounds for 6 people you don't recognize. That night, Dmitri hands you 5,000 rubles and a phone number written on a paper torn from a beer coaster. He tells you someone will call in the morning. He tells you to answer. He does not tell you anything else, and you understand that the not telling is itself information. So you take the money and the number, and you go home, and you do not sleep. And in the morning, the phone rings exactly as promised. The voice on the other end tells you to stand outside a grey building on Ulitsa Lenina at noon. You do. You walk for 20 minutes across a city that suddenly feels like it has more eyes than it did yesterday. You deliver the package. The man at the other end gives you an envelope. You bring the envelope back to Flatface, and he takes most of it and gives you back enough to pay rent and a little more. He tells you same time next week. You say yes because you do not yet understand that you have already said yes to something much larger than a delivery. This is how it begins. Not with a gun, or an oath, or a ceremony. With rent. With 11 days. With your cousin's table at the back of a bar. You carry packages. You collect debts in amounts too small to justify sending someone senior. You stand outside buildings for hours, doing nothing except being a body that communicates presence. You are paid in cash, in irregular amounts, always slightly more than you need, never enough to feel secure, which you will eventually understand is not an accident. You learn that financial dependency is an organizational tool. You are never afraid enough to quit and never comfortable enough to imagine leaving, and this narrow corridor is exactly where they want you. You absorb the rules not by being told them, but by watching what happens when others break them. A man named Vanya is late with a collection twice. After the second time, Vanya walks with a limp for the rest of his life. You are never late with anything. A brigadier named Oleg brings you into his crew officially, which means there are now 9 men you see regularly, and you all answer to Oleg, and Oleg answers upward to people you rarely see. You now collect debts of consequence, protect shipments of value, and occasionally do things at night that you refuse to replay in your mind the following morning. You are good at compartmentalization, which turns out to be the most necessary skill in this life. More necessary than courage, more necessary than loyalty. Because courage without compartmentalization breaks, and loyalty without it becomes impossible to sustain. You keep every room in your mind sealed. You function. At 5 years in, Oleg is arrested. This is the moment that separates the men who matter from the men who run. You hold the crew together for 3 weeks, collect what needs collecting, pay what needs paying, report up the chain with accuracy, and make no decisions that are above your authority. This last part is the most important. The VOR, the senior man who oversees your region, is a quiet man named Gennady, who speaks very slowly and never raises his voice. And what Gennady is measuring during those 3 weeks is not your toughness or your intelligence. He is measuring your restraint. Whether you take more than you're given. Whether you move before you're told to move. You do not. You wait. Gennady promotes you to brigadier and gives you 12 men who used to be Oleg's. Running a brigade means you are no longer personally absorbing risk in the street. You are now the person who decides how risk is distributed, which is a much heavier weight than carrying it yourself. You lose sleep over different things. Before, you feared getting caught. Now you fear making a decision that gets one of your 12 men caught, because their loyalty is the thing your position is built on. And loyalty is not abstract. It is specific. It is the accumulation of every time you paid someone when they were owed. Every time you stood between your crew and a punishment they didn't deserve. Every time you absorbed a loss upward, rather than pushing it down. You manage 12 men's rent, their families, their personal problems, their conflicts with each other. You arbitrate, you absorb. You are a governor and a buffer and a judge in a system with no written law. The money is now real. Not life-changing in the way you once imagined money could be, but structurally sufficient, which you have come to understand is different. You own nothing in your name. Your car, your apartment, the restaurant where you eat lunch on Thursdays. These are held in the names of other people and entities, assembled by a lawyer. You pay very well to be invisible. This is not paranoia, it is maintenance. You maintain your freedom the way a sailor maintains a ship, constantly, because the sea doesn't stop. At 9 years, you are brought into a conversation with a man named Volkov, who you have seen exactly twice before in your life, both times from a distance. Volkov oversees operations across 3 oblasts and has political relationships you understand exist but never ask about, because asking about the third rail is how you become the thing that touches it. Volkov wants to move money through a construction company that needs a reliable mid-level operator to manage the interface between the legitimate front and the actual ledger. He is offering you a position as a podpolkovnik, a lieutenant in the organizational sense. A man who bridges the criminal structure and the civilian infrastructure they have woven themselves through. You understand that this is an elevation and also a deeper entanglement. There is no parallel track where you manage this interface for a few years and then step off. You nod because there is no other answer, and also because you have not had another answer available to you for a very long time. You just haven't said it out loud until now. The next 4 years are the years of suits. You attend meetings in office buildings. You review contracts. You move through the city in ways that look entirely ordinary, because they are, on the surface, entirely ordinary. The violence is distant now, managed by people who report to people who report to you. A long chain that you keep deliberately blurry in your mind, because clarity about that chain is not useful to anyone, including you. You give orders by describing outcomes and letting the mechanics remain someone else's knowledge. This is how the senior men stay senior. You know what you need to know, no more. But knowing less doesn't mean you carry less. You know which judges are accessible and which aren't, and what the difference costs. You know which ministry official requires a direct conversation, and which one operates through a handler. You know that the most dangerous men in your world are not the ones with guns, but the ones with enough legitimate credibility to make problems disappear. Because those men can also make people disappear in ways that have no forensics. You cultivate relationships with those men carefully, over meals that last 3 hours, and say very little, in the understood language of patience and mutual necessity. Now you are 38. You have a daughter who is 7, and attends a private school in Switzerland, which you decided when she was born, in a moment of clarity you have never revisited. She will not know this world. You do not know yet whether that choice is possible to sustain, or whether the world follows bloodlines the way water follows gravity. You suspect the latter. You do not examine this suspicion too closely. Gennady died 2 years ago of a heart attack, which was a natural death, a rarity in the biography of men like Gennady. And at the funeral, you stood among 12 men, who all believed with varying degrees of evidence that they were the most likely successor to Gennady's position. None of you said this. You all said kind things about Gennady, and ate food from the reception table and drove away. The reorganization that followed was delicate and almost invisible, and resolved itself over 18 months in a way that left you standing exactly where you are now. Managing significant operations, reporting to a man in Moscow you speak with twice a month. Holding a position that is powerful enough to matter, and ambiguous enough that no one can charge you with anything specific. This is the architecture of survival at this level. Specificity is for the men below you. Above you, everything is atmospheric, implied, conducted in a register where nothing is ever directly said, and therefore nothing can be directly proven. You have become fluent in this register, the way people become fluent in second languages. Through long immersion, through mistake and correction, through the slow replacement of instinct with a more calibrated kind of attention. You are not afraid the way you were at 23. You are something else. Something without a clean name, which is the permanent condition of the weight you carry and cannot put down, because there is nowhere in this world, no table, no floor, no ground, you have ever found that is solid enough to hold it.